Hello, everyone. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and today and the rest of this week, we will be talking about every permutation there is to do with psionics. Yeah, that dreaded yet loved, yet admonished and feared and desired aspect of Dungeons and Dragons that existed in the very tail end of I believe it was the Player's Handbook, uh, back in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Psionics. Yeah, so let's get into it. All right, Psionics. Hey, good morning, everybody. Psionics is one of those things where I think it's made far too complicated than it needs to be. Yet, it has a different take on how you play the game, the type of creatures that you put into it, NPCs, and I think sometimes it can really, I believe psionics can really confuse people and also be used as a tool to, you know, for lack of a better term, break the game. All right, so but the problem with psionics is we need a definition of them. Okay, so psionics, what are some things that define psionics? Now, of course, a very basic ruling would be, well, magic comes from outside. It's like, you have to learn how to manipulate magical forces, or you summon some greater power that's given to you from the gods, or some greater power like a warlock. But psionics come from internally. Now, not talking mechanically, because we're going to get into that. Not talking mechanically, but from an outsider's standpoint, psionics, even if you go so far as to say use pop media culture like Star Wars, psionics tends to be very internalized. So even if the power comes from outside of you, that there's some kind of endurance, focus, some kind of pressure or willpower that you have to generate in order to affect what the psionic psychic ability is, whether it's lifting an object, or digging into someone's mind, or lifting your body, or setting something on fire, what have you. Also, psionics tends to be far more quiet, far more subtle, but may take longer to activate, rather than it seems as if there's an on-off button for magic. Like if you cast magic, definitely, just like Tesla Ranger says in the chat, it's like concentration, right? So usually we think of magic as being something that you summon up. So you summon up this energy. It goes off. So let's say you cast a fireball, or you cast a psychic shield, or something like that from a magical spell, or you detect something. You do it, your eyes glow or whatever. You move your hands in the air. It's done. When it's over, the spell is gone. Whereas more psychic abilities tend to linger on further. And I'm talking about this as a flavor standpoint, and also RP Gamer. Yeah, that's right, I'm back. So one aspect of psychic ability also is that there's this this idea that there's an entwined network of sorts, and I don't necessarily mean like hackers and being online, but that powerful psychics can sense other powerful psychics in their machinations. They can sense when someone is using their abilities. They have premonitions or feelings that someone else is doing something, or there's a residue left where an action has taken place. Okay, so we got past that, right? Because psychic abilities come in all kinds of flavors and shapes and things. There are some role-playing games that actually point out specifics in that, other than 5th edition, rather than Dungeons and Dragons, with which 5th edition does not yet have psionics in it, although they are working on the Mystic, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, they're going to run kind of manipulate the rules as use spell casting, because really, what is psionics but except spell casting, right? Or a derivation thereof. So mechanically, psionics, you got two options. You either design it from the ground up, or you use what you have and just make it use a parity system, essentially reskinning it. So if you are an avid fan of whatever game system you have and it does not have psionics in it, I behoove you to not design something from the ground up unless you're designing your own system, or you are willing to take the punishment of having things go out of balance, and you have great players that are willing to allow it to move and shape itself. Just reskin the hell out of everything you already have. If it's not magic missile, just call it, kinetic force. If it's a shield spell, call it telekinetic shield. If it's a floating disc spell, if it's a mage hand, whatever, just reskin everything. Instead of cantrips, they are just at will abilities, stage 0 abilities or something like that. Yeah, even Alex C says a spellcaster that doesn't need any type of components, which, let's be honest, the majority of us don't use spell components. I mean, sure, there's some like verbalizing or somatic things that we might mind bullets. Yeah, true. But for the most part, we don't really use spell components except for like flavor and whatnot. So now the issue you will have to deal with is that most of us kind of think of psionics as being very subtle. I do the Professor X, take two fingers, place it on my temple, I concentrate a little bit, and somebody does what I tell them to do, hiding what actions you're taking. Whereas the standard is that you are not hiding what you're doing unless you specifically either have that kind of feat or ability, or you're in a situation where you are hidden. So game masters and players are going to have to work together and say, okay, are psionic abilities in my setting subtle? Are they hidden? Can people tell they're going on? I would default and say no, unless you have a specific ability or you are taking specific actions or quote unquote disadvantages to perform said actions. Otherwise, like some players will probably want, they want to have this huge great advantage simply because they're playing someone who has psionics. Another aspect is what kind of psionic result source of damage or effect is coming through. For example, 5th edition has a limit of far fewer defenses and ways to avoid psychic energy and force damage, whereas they have tons of things that do fire and poison. Why they've done this, I don't know. I would just assume if you have sources of damage, you just make them equalize, but they have not. So changing, say, a spell like fireball or magic missile from force damage or fire damage into psychic damage is going to really unbalance the game. That is, unless you, as the game master, take a whole bunch of those creatures and allow them to have psychic damage as their source of damage as well. Because let's face it, players are going to want to have an advantage, right? They're going to want to have something there's many who just like, hey, I want to do something that nobody else can do and nobody can stop me. And, I can pat myself on the back, blah, blah, blah. But if you allow your players to have it, why can't the enemies have it? It's like having playing an Aarakocra, right? Hey, I can fly. It's like, well, you're from a race that can fly. That means there's probably a whole other race of people who can fly as well. So yeah. Yeah. Fat Ninja says, yes, X-Men 5e, please. Yeah, there are very few creatures that have a resistance or immunity to psychic damage. So I would be very hesitant to change things. But why change it, right? You can have fireball or burning hands and just call it, pyrokinesis or something, instead of I don't know, ray of frost or something, it's cryokinesis. There's a role-playing game created by White Wolf. It used to be called Aeon. They had to change it for legal reasons and started calling it Trinity. and it was about playing in the near future, where these different factions had the ability to grant you psychic abilities, and they had psychic abilities from like psychic healing and cryokinesis, pyrokinesis, electrokinesis, photokinesis or lumen kinesis, something like that, where you could affect to photons in the air to create holograms and such. So yeah, psychic abilities. Now, one great thing about psychic abilities, I believe, is how organic you can make them feel in your game. So the ability to walk into a room and feel the psychic residue of something that happened there, or altering spells like Speak with the Dead because so many people died. There was like a psychic scream. A player character that wakes in the middle of the night, from cold sweats because they've received an image of something, or a ghost or something reaches out from the astral world and contacts this person who has psychic abilities. So I think for me, I find it to have a lot more flavorful moments rather than the mechanical things. Prue says, I've only ever played with the Psionic once back in the AD&D days. He was the type of player who constantly went out of his way to one-up and power game and power play against the DM. Yeah, and that's the real thing. That's why I say, if you really don't want to go through the process of building from the ground up, guys, just reskin everything. Just take the words, use some whiteout. I don't know if you guys even remember whiteout, some of you young bucks. Take a black magic marker, redact all the spell things, and just put something else instead of spell slots. It's psychic potential or something instead of, so your cantrips are like the things you can do every day. Your so-called spell slots or psionic abilities. You can only do them so many times before a rest because you get extremely tired. So if you have like lightning bolt, instead of lightning bolt, it could be like a psychic lash or something. And once you do it, you just role play out the fact that your endurance is drained or whatever. Just do that kind of thing. Prue says that, and some of the comments I've seen from certain players online, I think that has colored my vision unfavorably on this class. I agree that it's not the act of having psionics, it's the way people have used it and abused it as a tool. I feel. Alex C says, the old days of 2E, my first Dark Sun character, fighter psionic. Yeah, and see, Dark Sun, a great setting where psionics has kind of replaced spell casting because of how much damage spells have done in terms of draining life from the environment. And so many of the creatures and the player characters have access to psionics, and it's just replaced one with the other. Not really a big thing. RP Gamer says, I believe that all or most of the X-Men abilities can be found or reskinned in 5e already. Alex C says 2E powers were OP and unbalanced. It absolutely was, right? It was like something like ego whip and ID insinuation and all those kind of things. And of course, the minute you had psionics against someone who didn't have psionics at all, you just became this overpowered, and it was like a separate game system almost. Whatever. Prue says, I love the Psychers and Dark Heresy, though. I love the flavor for psionics. I just feel like a lot of the nostalgia around them are closely tied to the fact that the class used to be game breaking. And I think really one of the problems is that that 5th edition classic Dungeons and Dragons has a tiered system. You move up in levels, and as you move up in levels, you get greater and greater abilities when it comes to spells. And psionics had a system of pick what you want, no matter what level you were. And so when you were very low level, you got access to pick things that only very high level characters could get. And then as you gained greater abilities to boost those abilities that you picked, they just became greater and greater. And then of course there's this weird kind of there's this weird idea that for some reason magic can't stop psionics, psionics can't stop magic, which it boggles my mind. Like, why would you even have that? if you're going to have a rule like that, you're going to have things that are imbalanced. So having the ability to just say, hey, listen, if you're going to use a psychic blast instead of calling it magic missile, it operates the exact same way, and then you're done. It says, RP Gamer says, I think if you've built the game around them rather than just slot them in, it will work. It would work better. Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to create this other system and try to shoehorn it in, which really in AD&D, that's what they did, right? Someone had this idea, they stuck it at the back of the book, and it wasn't intended to slot in nicely into the system. But that being said, psionics, how can we have psionics into our game? How can we add them in? Now, one of the things I believe that gets a lot of gets beat up quite a bit with psionics is the monk. And from my opinion, I think if you're going to have psionics in a game, I think a monk fits actually perfectly into it. If you ignore the fact that they're called monks, and here's what I mean. Having like a society of psychic warriors, or maybe like people living on a mountain and they're training each other, that you could kind of have a mix of like wizards, sorcerers, and monks all together, and they're just various derivations of each other, just as if you would have, say, monks and fighters and kind of merged together as maybe like a gladiator class of sorts, where some flow towards the monk side versus the fighter side, but they're all of the same ilk, and they all are able to, be trained in their abilities and things. I think would really work. Prue says, I'm not very smart DM. I really rely quite heavily on my players enjoying the same style of game that I do and not being jerks. Yeah, you can never tell who's going to reach in the toolbox and if they're going to snatch out a hammer and treat every problem like a nail. I think it's just for me, I think it's just a matter of us attaching ourselves to the words far too heavily than its purpose in the game. That's what I really think. Let's see. Alex Ranger, Tesla Ranger says, what are Jedi but psionic warrior monks? Absolutely. I mean, in essence, they are future monks with psychic powers, and they have a limited repertoire of what they can do, and they go around. They may not even be, considering some of the abilities they can do, they may not even be very high level if you were to translate them, air quotes, into Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, Mage Hand is a cantrip, which you see them use that by snatching their lightsaber out of their belt, or when it's slides across the floor. But maybe some of the higher level abilities they are unable to do on a regular basis, whether it's because they're tired or it takes too much concentration. Yeah, in fact, Ninja says, interesting concept for RP, medieval superheroes. DBJ, get on it. Yeah. I've actually thought of the medieval superhero thing, might get a little imbalancing there too, man, especially if you make someone like Superman or Thor or the Hulk or something. RP says, I think a great way, if you did want to bring in Sonics into an already existing setting or system, why not do it in the world? Have a world-changing event that gives everything these powers. And that's the issue, really, that the players don't want to talk about is, okay, hey, I've got Sonics. What about the rest of the world? Just giving everyone or everything those abilities. Now, here's some limitations on Sonics I think people tend not to think about, but when we think of magic, having a permanent effect on the world, meaning like a wizard, floats a castle in the air. The wizard's long dead. It's been 1,000 years. The castle's still floating. A wizard mutates a creature, combines an owl and a bear, and now the owl bear just runs around and the wizard's long dead. The psychic abilities tend to have this, origin from the mind, very little residual effect in terms of really affecting the world on a macro sense. And so affecting the world, like having, tons of magical creatures and things, might not be something that's in a sonic world. It might be that, let's say let's go with like an evil lich or wizard or something like that, but instead they are a powerful scion, that the world has changed only because they say it's changed. And once they're put down, maybe their changes start to fade over time. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, Alex C said, already made the homebrew psionic, never liked the mystic, looked broken in my opinion. I kind of agree with you. I think there's been too much emphasis on trying to make psionics so different that you have a problem where it doesn't, it's a, round peg, square hole kind of thing. It won't fit into the system. And yeah, I don't know. I just think that I think it's created, it's become a weapon for players to use, and poison for game masters to want to include in their world. And then you have to include the fact in the world that psionics exists separate from everything else. And then again, you have to think about, the abilities of those creatures and NPCs and what effects they have and such. Now, psionics also has a tendency to not only just have telekinetic abilities, but telepathic. And having a bunch of people running around who can very easily mind control people, whether through hypnotism or illusions or distractions, whatever, feels like it's game breaking, but that already exists as well. You have comic book 1602. 1602. Only for some reason, I know I haven't seen it, but the first thing that comes to mind are the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen for some reason. I don't know why. But yeah, anyway, having a bunch of people running around that have mind control can feel like they can, break the game. But if those things already exist and there are defenses for it, such as maybe a city that has guardians, such as wolves or dogs of some sort that can sniff out psionics. Maybe there's some other kind of far more alien creatures that can do so. There may be guardians in large city states that kind of like maybe sit in watchtowers that can feel those abilities. And better yet, even psionic investigators that can trace if someone's mind has been affected and or whether those abilities have been used. I think would make for a far more dynamic setting where, the players are using their psionic abilities, but then there's all these NPCs running around like, hey, I can sense something going on in the psychic signature. I can feel, I don't know who it is, but I know the same person is creating this exact same psionic signature. And I think in those cases where you have maybe the players are investigators, or they are bounty hunters, or they are being, there's an enemy they can't see, but they know the residual effects of the enemy, I think is far greater story idea than worrying about, trying to create a new psionic system. Now, there are plenty of psychic creatures, right? Like, you got to go with the classics, like the Illithids or the Mind Flayers, Intellect Devourers, which I think don't get a lot of love. All the Gith and their versions, Gith Yankee, Gith Zeri, Beholders kind of slot into there a little bit. But there's things like Lamias and even the Accursed Doppelganger slightly fits into that mold. Hags fit into that mold as well. RP Gamer says, I think when GMs try to introduce psionics, generally they don't think of negatives, such as a telepath not having developed a filter and hearing everyone's thoughts. I once read a book series where, when you had psychic potential, you had to be taught the filters in using your psionic abilities. For example, not broadcasting your own thoughts, or the ability to touch people without sending your thoughts to them and them you absorbing or reading their thoughts, like you said, without having a filter. And how common is that, to be a telepath without skill and you pick up those abilities, which I think it would behoove you guys to have, like, depending. So instead of having components, you have like the concentration check, and instead of like a pass fail where you roll to, you make your so-called like spell casting check and just call it like, psionic ability check or something. So you make your roll, and every time you make your roll, if you make it, it works. If you don't, it fails. But what you could actually have are gradients, so that if you fail, you may fail, but you also send out a signature that other people can sense that you're trying to do something, as opposed to you succeed, but the person you're trying to mind control knows you're doing it, versus rolling a very high roll and you succeed and the person doesn't notice it. Alex C says dispel magic or nullify psionic can temporarily cancel each other out for a short time. Anti-magic field, anti-psionic field do the same, just have disadvantage on the check. Exactly. Just basically for every advantage, just there should be some sort of disadvantage, just like in a spell system. You just reskin it into the psionic system and you're done. RP Gamer says psionics may be the internal natural ability, but you still need training in it. And that's true. So, for example, players that want to play, say, a sorcerer in your game might be considered your natural psionics, whereas the wizard style classes might be more the trained, and monk classes may be the trained psionicists. And there may be unintended effects. So, for example, one question often asked is, hey, if I try to influence someone's mind with, say, hold monster or charm person, do they know that I did it? And that might be based on a die roll, right? You roll to control them, or they roll, the individual rolls their saving throw, and based on that roll, depending on how high or low it is based on whether they were able to detect it or not, right? Because you can mind control someone and they know they're being mind controlled, and they may even get a flash of who did it, or people around you as you try to, focus your psychic abilities. If you make a low roll, maybe they can sense there's something wrong with you, or they're getting flashes of you, or even getting details about your memories or past or something, or even your motivations. So yeah, I would have some kind of variation, like wild magic surges or such. Not necessarily the wild magic table in Under the Sorcerer, which I think is a little bit too gonzo, summoning up sheep or turning into a goat and, growing twice your height and all that kind of dumb stuff. I don't know. I think there's a little too gonzo. But you could reskin a ton of those, use the same chart, and just have things like a psychic bleed where everyone gets an image of what you look like in their head for some reason. They can't get rid of it. Or you try to use a telekinetic blast, but small items start to lift off of tables and come loose, or doors and shutters start to swing open and closed violently, or all the chairs and tables and dishes and everything start to move and shatter, or whatever. You could have those kind of things where you make it thematic. Prue says a thematic, a personal risk is cool. So you could even shape it where maybe one PC is far more telekinetic versus another PC who is more a mentalist, so that people are the end result of the wild surges are based on the theme that you picked. So a pyrokinetic or cryokinetic might have different side effects, meaning maybe they end up covering the walls and ceiling with a thin layer of frost, to trapping themselves in a block of ice themselves, or causing frostbite to themselves and their allies or something like that. Alex C says, like, a critical fail will result in stunning yourself and taking psychic damage and lose twice as much from the initial cost. Exactly, losing spell, loss of spell slots, loss of actions like a movement or bonus action, losses of constitution or intelligence. All these could be temporary, of course. Exhaustion levels, stunning, incapacitated, paralyzed, deafened, muted. Those kind of things. Absolutely, I would have a lot of those, maybe on a table or a random die roll or something like that, just so that there's like a like RP Gamer says, having a footprint. Yeah. Ooh, vials break, including everyone's potions. Ooh, nasty. Yeah. Shattering glass because you're telekinetic. Sure, why not? And then those wild surges themselves can become leave a psychic residue or evidence, a backlash that others could trace. And there may even be monsters in the world that hunt down active psychics, which will be another limiting factor. Let's say, like, I always love the displacer beasts, right? That's another one of my favorite. And maybe the displacer beasts are like hunters of psychics in this world. And whenever some psychic starts using their powers, they can just kind of sniff it, and sniff those people down and like come and run after them or something, which would be kind of a strange thing. Darius Jana says, "Oh my God, Psionics! I need to remember to make rule system for morphic fields and such." And Prue says, "Yeah, or disadvantage on wisdom saving throws for a turn after psychic mishap." Absolutely, even limitations on like charisma rolls. Like maybe there's like temporary disadvantage. Maybe the psychic does something and they're easily manipulated, so they have disadvantage on a charisma save. Maybe they have such severe headaches and migraines that they have a loss of points or disadvantage on intelligence checks. Loss of spell slots, those kind of things. So yeah, loss of movement rate. They're stunned and they're like stumbling along, so their movement rates cut down, or in order to gather themselves, they lose their bonus action for 1d4 rounds or something, or they have to spend a full round to gather. They're incapacitated until they get a full round to gather themselves together, shake off the effect, and then move on from there. You can do all those kind of things. Alex says, like a thunder wave that you use on your enemies instead blasts you backwards along with your companions. Exactly. Prue says, as I said, I'm not a smart DM. Doesn't mean I can't be devious sometimes. Yeah, we all love to like flex that devious muscle, right? Darius Jana says, why so mean to the party? My next NPC will be a nascent Sonic who broadcasts their teenage cellulas to all around. Ooh, and, you can have a lot of fun with the dirty psychic, who's just like, maybe the PCs have to protect a powerful but untrained psychic child or teenager or something, and all the while they're trying to protect this individual, but this young person is broadcasting their thoughts and feelings. Maybe they're even bleeding off their fears to other people, making them scared, or they're broadcasting their own strong-minded rebelliousness over into other individuals. And so I feel like I guess we're calling it like a psychic bleed, is you can have a lot of fun with it. You don't want to get too gonzo. You don't want to get too silly unless the moment calls for it. But for me, I believe that's kind of the hallmark of Psionics versus just magic, which of course magic, you have, detect magic, and magic allows you to detect what kind of magic there is, who's there, who casts a spell, maybe some kind of dangers. And with Psionics, I believe it's very heavily tied to the practitioner. And so you can have this idea where someone is getting a psychic signature all around a city and out through the wilderness and such, even though they may not have seen this individual. And then when they confront that person, they may have an idea of what abilities they have, what their motivations are, or what crimes they've committed, that kind of things. Pseudo drag. Yeah, there's also the idea of creatures that feed on psychic power. So you could reskin some of those. There's not very many, but you could reskin some of the creatures that have that go after spellcasters, and they can go after like psychic individuals. For example, vampires, mummies. Some of your undead could be powered by, drawn to, addicted to those with psychic powers. And then untrained potential psychics could be kidnapped and used as like power batteries by by liches or something in the world, using their abilities and keeping them alive, but at the same time draining them of their abilities. I'm losing track of the chat. RP says, going back to X-Men, you have a Jean Grey. When she first joins, she hears people's thoughts accidentally, but also implants her thoughts into others accidentally as well. Yeah, you can. This is also a great way to impart information to the players, where someone could pick up a stray thought about, say, a murder that's about to happen, or assassination, or hidden treasure, or blackmail, or something, and the PC doesn't know where it came from. They just have this a little hint of information, and then now they have to go about. They know that someone's going to be killed. They may even have an image of who that person may be that might be killed, but they have no evidence. They're like, listen, all I know is I picked up this stray thought. You have to protect yourself. And of course, everyone around them is going, yeah, right. You heard this in your mind. You're just a crazy individual, like a palm reader. Go away from me. And so that might in itself be a thing. Even in Star Wars, for quite a while, the Jedi, although they were known to have abilities, a lot of people didn't trust them, or didn't quite believe they had the abilities that they did, using abilities like post-cognition and precognition, astral projection, extrasensory perception, being able to mind probe people, being able to get like like an object awareness, where you can pick up an object and feel its psychic signature, say from a murder weapon or something, are also great ways to add in the role-playing aspect of using psionics. Maybe even needing to gather enough clues to find an enemy and get the treasure or something, because you can still have a big old bug hunt, right? But instead of getting a map and going to the treasure, maybe they have to acquire bits and pieces from individuals that maybe came from a sailing ship or something, and each of them has a section of where to go and what to do, but the PCs have to piece it together. There's also the idea of like a dream world, where people don't remember things exactly, they remember it emotionally, and so you could also have players step into another world where, instead of things being having a reality to them, they have an emotional context. They are, oh man, my brain's not working. But I know what I mean. I can't describe it. RP says you could have the Sonics of the party battling Sonic enemies solely in a mental plane, while the other members have to protect their physical bodies. Alex C says thought eaters, intellect devourers, which I love, illithids, gem dragons, Baku, Giths, and numerous creatures. Ooh, whoa. That was odd, because I don't remember setting that. Sorry about that, guys. There's a lot of creatures that are psychic. Intellect devourers don't get a lot of love, as much as the Gith and the illithids or mind flayers. Because if you guys don't remember, intellect devourers were the dog-sized brains that had 4 legs, and it basically looked like a big human brain with legs, and it had psychic abilities, and then somehow it could shrink down and crawl inside of your mouth and start piloting your body like a robot or something. Pretty nasty things. Yeah, Android forever. Hey, JP. Having a psionic in a group hunting a serial killer, or some cultist conspiracy could be an awesome game. I'd run that. Yeah, having, especially if the PCs, it's where you get to have fun with the fact that the PCs can do something someone else can't. So it could be that some of the creatures, now imagine this, imagine creatures that have no physical effect on anyone without psionic abilities. But if you have psionics, those creatures exist in a psychic world but have a physical effect on you. So you could have like a psychic creature, like the displacer beasts that chase you through the city, and when you're attacked by it, you have the physical bites and claw marks from it, but the human beings around you can't see it. It's because you have psychic abilities, you can see it, and it can now see you. And so it could be this other psychic plane that's like an overlay on ours, and when you step into it or you use your abilities, you temporarily step from the physical world into this psychic world where these other very dangerous creatures and monstrous creatures exist, which in itself could be a limitation unto itself, that, hey, if you've got psychic powers, you are also victim to, you could become a victim to these other creatures being hunted down by them, and no one else can help you fight them off, because they would just be like, their hands would just pass them. They're in the ethereal plane or something, or astral plane, or whatever have you, if you want to call it that. Yeah, RP says that could be how they're tracking the killer. They're sending their thoughts, or even what they're seeing, and the party psionic is picking up on it, which would be pretty nasty. That sounds like a Call of Cthulhu kind of thing right there, where a killer is sending its murderous kills and broadcasting it out to the people who can sense it. And so you have to stop the killer before you suffer irreparable harm, which is another thing. Hey, Prue, have a good one now. Yeah, have a good day. We're going to be on this subject all week, so you're not going to lose anything. And have a great day. There could be an idea where there are rules in 5th edition and plenty other games, especially all of the Call of Cthulhu games have madness, have like despair. They have a thing where you go mad slowly, and that might be a thing you want to include in the game if you're going to add psionics, where you're using your psionic abilities, but you're also drawing in unconsciously the thoughts and fears from other people, and you're experiencing those drawbacks from other people, even though you may not have a fear of spiders, someone else may have. Although you may not be claustrophobic, somebody else may be. People have tons of guilt and pain and despair about the things that are going on in their lives, and you as a psionic might be picking up on those things and acquiring those, and you may have to have long periods of rest to kind of expel those outer thoughts that are coming into your brain. And that might be a limitation on psionics as well, where you start using the madness rules, where you start like maybe you start acquiring points, like maybe, okay, it starts at 0, and every time you use an ability, you just keep adding 1 to it, and you roll a D100 percentage. So when you get 18 points, you have an 18% chance of acquiring like a temporary madness, 19% chance, 20% chance, or something like that. Alex C says fail by 5 or more short term, fail by 10 or more long term, critical fail, indefinite madness upon taking psychic damage. Exactly. So you roll your D20, and you need to beat a 12, and instead you rolled a 7, right? So you fail by 5, boom, you get like a little temporary madness or something. And it could keep stacking. So maybe it's temporary by only a couple of rounds, but then if you fail again, it goes from rounds to minutes to hours to days, those kind of things. So yeah, you could have have this stackable or growing madness that might be one of the reasons people are afraid of psionics in your world, because not only are they powerful, but there's this creeping madness that seems to overcome so many of them. And it could be the NPCs, the ones that completely go mad, that are catatonic, are the most dangerous. So instead of a powerful lich, they could be bedridden. They could be completely catatonic, but their minds are powerful as a ghost or a lich or something. And when they fall into deep madness, the PCs could be those individuals that have to so-called take down the catatonic individuals, because their minds are so powerful that they are shaking mountains and cracking the earth and making people's brains bleed out of other people's noses and mouths and ears and their eyes or something. JP says, I remember there was an adventure where a crime is committed and people get false memories implanted into them, so they have to confess guilt while innocent. The players have to become psychic investigators. And that's a great thing too. A psychic criminal that is mind controlling other people to commit crimes for them. The individuals committing the crimes are innocent, but the person doing it is leaving these little breadcrumbs that have to be traced, and no one can trace them except the psychic individuals. And I think this would be really great for low-level play, where it's not so much like flinging cars or something, but it's more a battle of wits. Alex is a psychic lich. Oh my God, yeah, exactly. You could have maybe a person has gotten to the point where their physical body their physical body no longer needs to be alive, right? They're walking around, but really they're just a walking, desiccated skeleton zombie thing, all right? But their mind is so powerful, it's keeping them alive. And so therefore, yeah, their body works, but it's just a shell, but their brain is really powerful. So all their abilities are psychic. That'd be really dangerous, really big. RP says, how about big cities have psychic guards to protect the citizens from having thoughts read or manipulated? You could have, yeah, absolutely. You could have in important places, government buildings, corporations, guild houses, space habitats may have guards. Especially if you have power, you have influence, you're going to have these psychics on your side, and their only job is to detect the emotions, detect abilities or something of psychic thieves that are in the area. You can also play with like Fat Ninja was talking about the X-Men. Not every person that has psychic abilities has the exact same abilities. You can have people who are hyper focused in one thing. For example, there's the skill monkey character who absorbs the skills of other people so that they themselves have skills. So if they stand near someone who has martial arts, they've got martial arts. They're near someone who has computer programming, they have computer programming. When someone casts an ability, they can duplicate those same abilities, or they can temporarily mimic someone's behavior, like their voice or thoughts or something. There's a psychic ability to act as an animal, where you become, you are still physically a human being, but you take on the characteristics of a tiger or a wolf or a monkey or an elephant or something, like Vixen the superhero. You could have, like I said, cryokinesis, psychokinesis, electrokinesis, where you're summoning, creating like thick ozone, where there's like static electricity in the air. Yeah, exactly. The RP says the party turns up and the big bad behind everything is just a powerful psychic brain in a jar. Yeah, and that's the thing with psychics, right? Like their physical bodies might not be too imposing, but their mental abilities might be really great. I mean, even a thing in Dungeons and Dragons, you have strength, dex, and constitution. Maybe in the psychic plane, your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma are used as your strength, dex, and constitution. So if you fight someone or you're drawn into the psychic plane, your intelligence is your strength, your wisdom is your dex, your charisma is your constitution. And you could do it that way. So your physical characters are like, I'm at a real loss here in the psychic plane. And then those characters who have very weak physical abilities might be very powerful in this other psychic overlay or something. Um, Alex says you can limit the amount of powers they have. They are not wizards and with scrolls and documents and collect a lot of spells. You're limited on how many you know. And that's another limitation. Wizards, scrolls, spell books, things carved on walls, learning arcane sigils. Psychic abilities tend, flavor-wise, tend not to be the kind of thing you read in a book or get a scroll. For the most part, it's a combination of long days, months, years, tens of years of study, being trained by those who are more powerful than you, and being awakened. So even those magic items, there are very few. Usually you hear about like the psychic crystal or psychic orb or something that can enhance your abilities. But for the most part, psionicists do not have scrolls and spell books to enhance what they do. It's more of a mental, attunement. After a great psionic battle, they have to stop and concentrate as they wipe the blood from their nose or something like that, right? They have to center themselves. They have to meditate. They have to reach to a higher plane or commune with their ancestors or what have you, or leave their body behind or something. And you always have, it's the aligning their chakras kind of thing. And so that could be another limitation where instead of having spell books to worry about and components to worry about, it's all about the rest. That their rest takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to regather their abilities. And during that time, maybe that's their weakened state. Tesla Ranger says RP gamer, a brain in a jar in a mech. Imagine a psychic Terminator, right? It's got the living brain, but the body's mechanical. Maybe I just created something really bad there. Warforged, gear forged with a living human brain inside that's a powerful psychic. That'd be nasty. Vincent said, reading the chat is pretty interesting. These stones that orbit the head of ion stones are a great bleed over from magic to psionics, right? Because a lot of the stones give you bonuses to like intelligence or wisdom, or give you some ability to detect things, whether it's like detecting thoughts or something like that. Vincent says they're stupidly distracting. I don't know. It'd be like a bug like floating around your head, like Alex says I use intelligence as its base manifesting ability, strength for psychokinesis, dexterity for psychoportation, constitution for psychometabolism, charisma for telepathy, wisdom for clairsentience. That's another thing, like psychic, the psychic ability to manipulate the body and physical things, changing their shape, affecting your adrenal system, enhancing your strength and your speed, knitting wounds together, the psychic surgery, laying on hands on other people and knitting them together. Clerics and clerical abilities, for me, lean far more towards psychic abilities than the wizards do, because clerics tend to have the healing, the mental connection, and the summoning of abilities beyond them, like producing flame or something could very well be pyrokinetic ability. There's a cleric ability to summon a spiritual weapon, which could be like a psychic blade or a sword or something like that. Clockwork mech, that would be nasty. A golem with a human brain inside. It's a powerful lich. That you can't harm them because they're like made out of like iron or adamantium or something like that. Or what's the not adamant mithril, adamantine, whatever, star metal, something like that. That'd be pretty neat. In Batman Beyond, there was a psionic organization where one of them had telekinesis and another one simply augmented his body and was stupidly strong, resilient. A little girl that could project nightmares. Yeah, absolutely. Dead Man the Storyteller says the source of the Warforged. He says, so you can play with psionics without, I think, by explaining to your players that the benefit they get from being a psionic is the same benefit every other class has, as well as the disadvantages and such. And for any game system, I would go with the same thing, where you have just as many disadvantages as advantages. This might make you a target for creatures. This might make you a target for maybe there are systems that have backlash. Maybe there's gemstones in doorways, or in the far future, there's mechanical systems that create a backlash when psionics are used. Maybe there is a I don't know, there's a sound wave or a psychic wave energy where if you project it on a psion wave, it causes headaches. And so within the police station, you have these headaches where your abilities aren't able to be used, or the authorities have guns that, you know, send out these waves that just affect the mind. And so anyone with psychic abilities have these, like, you know, their head starts hurting and their nose starts to bleed or something, and their ears start to bleed when it's affected by them, when they're within the zone or whatever, the cone of energy. Here we go with the 3.5. Yeah, simply magic, just with a twist and unseen. Exactly. Vincent says psionics were extremely flexible in 3.5. They only had one summon spell where they summoned a psychic crystal construct, and they could use more psi points to boost it or give it additional abilities. Yeah, RP says, I think you can make them as simple or as complicated as you want, and either approach is fine. You know, astral constructs, they were. Yeah, not too many. You don't really see too many psionic constructs or devices or magic items or high-tech items, but usually what they are usually either things that enhance yourself, disadvantage someone else for using that, or they allow you to maybe project your abilities through something else as well. So instead of like maybe a psionic construct could be, instead of a familiar like an animal, they could be like, instead you flavor it like a stone, or it could be a sonic construct that you've created out of your mind. So it is a familiar, but it is actually something that maybe it was an old pet when you were a small child, and you could never let go of this small frog or cat or something, or monkey. And it actually is, it has a physical, it has all the physical stats. It does whatever it's supposed to do, whether it's a pixie or whatever the hell it is, but it's created or powered or its abilities are reinforced by your psychic abilities. Yeah, Vince says they were basically monks, which I said, I think monks, strangely enough, although monks may not fit into people's idea of what medieval society would be, I think monks really do fit into a psionic caste system, where a monk is just basically a slight derivation off of people who are studying psionics anyway. You could use it similar to Green Lantern, but without the ring. Yeah, I would say Green Lanterns are our version of psionics anyway. So yeah, a psychic crystal or something where you're able to use your abilities through it, or maybe they take the place of spell books in your world. So a spell focus would be like a crystal, and you have to concentrate on the crystal to get your abilities back, as opposed to reading a spell book. It would just operate exactly the same way. Maybe when you learn other psychic disciplines, you have to imprint the psychic crystal with these new disciplines, as if you were writing them in a spell book, with the same costs and gold piece costs and times and all that kind of crap. Yeah, Green Lantern would be absolutely psychic for sure. Vincent says, or psionics are non-physical monks, so to speak. They've I don't know, grown past the need to use their physical abilities in conjunction with their mental abilities. So for example, maybe your monk doesn't know martial arts per se, but is fast and quick because they can predict other people's actions. And when they strike people, it's not their ability to strike. It's not them, like, you know, doing the classic Shaolin monk, but it's them striking someone and then focusing their psychic abilities through their touch, which causes the damage, or which causes someone to trip and fall or fall over, or they hit a pressure point that causes pain. And it's more or less them, you know, using psychic abilities. Whereas the non-monk version of them would be, well, I don't need to physically touch someone. I can actually project my mind out and use my reskinned magic missile as a telekinetic punch to hit someone. Fatness is a great conversation, guys. This is awesome. Yeah, guys, don't listen to me. Go in the chat. You're probably going to find a whole hell of a lot more information there from me. Vince says the problem I always had with Psionics is that mechanically we're just superior to other magic forms, more flexible, more powerful, and you don't need somatic or verbal components. Yeah, we talked about it earlier, right? Like it's like the idea of Psionics has just been used as this tool far too often by players to abuse a system where it's not supposed to be abused. And I think it behooves everybody to get together and say, okay, are our psionics, are they hidden? Are they subtle? If not, what effect does it have when you use them? My contention is they're not subtle unless everyone agrees they are, because if they're subtle for the players, it's going to be subtle for the NPCs too, right? Your character's being mind controlled and you have no idea where they're at. And I, like before, I was saying maybe it's based on a die roll. The higher the roll, the more subtle your ability is. Meaning, if you try to mind control someone and you roll a 19 or 20, they have no idea they're even being mind controlled. Whereas if you need to roll a 12 or more and you rolled a 13, you succeeded, but this person knows exactly who's doing it and that they're being controlled. And they may even be able to say something about it, like, hey, I can't control my body. Someone is doing it. If you fail, maybe they have a image of who you are or where you're at or can sense you. Or it could even be something emotional where if you, let's say you try to mind control the guard doesn't recognize you, but the next time you see the guard kind of looking at you like, I know you from somewhere. There's for some reason I just don't like you. That could be it. Yeah, the rules already in the core, just need to slap it together. Yeah, put limits on. RP Gamer says you need to put limits on powers or negatives to using psionics. Like I said, being hunted by creatures that are only psionic. A sonic backlash. Maybe if you fail a roll, you receive some kind of loss. You become stunned, incapacitated. Your reductions. You get disadvantages on the next ability roll you make. You suffer exhaustion, paralysis, go blind or deaf or something like that. In 5e, just use the subtle spell meta magic. It's identical to the nature of psi spells. Exactly. So, which would mean that the subtle spell meta magic is available to the person that picks it, so that other psychic abilities are not subtle. You know what I mean? So you have the person who gains that has the subtle magic. They can use their mage hand, telekinetic ability to move a door and open it and close it without anyone noticing it, or snatch some jewelry. Whereas the other person doing it, there may be like a physical psychic force. People can actually feel it moving through the air and might be able to trace back where it came from. So across the room, the gemstone's being picked up and everyone looks from the gemstone back to the person doing it, and maybe the air shimmers or something like that. You could always have whatever. Vince says, yeah, a subtle psychic hidden in a group of people would be a terrifying enemy. And the subtle is already built into the class. So those who have that ability, if that's part of their class feature, that's part of their build, how they want their character to be done, that's fine. Then that would mean that everyone else who doesn't have that, the drawback is that there are others who don't have it. And so, of course, if a player character can have it, the enemies can have it. I think that's where the real problem comes in. It's not players picking it. It's if allowing broken things in games is only broken because players try to use it when they are aware that other people can't have it or don't have it, or the game master is unwilling to use it. My contention is, hey, give it to the players. PCs have it too. The NPCs have it too. Monsters may be able to pick, the subtle ability. Monsters have resistance to psychic energy. Monsters have, plus there's plenty of creatures that thematically would be immune to psychic intrusions, like your undead, your plants, your oozes, your constructs. Those are the four that come to mind already. It could be that CR levels might have some effect on psionics as well. So if a PC fights a creature that is of a CR level above their character, I'm just making this up off the top of my head. So if you're a third level character, you're fighting CR4 and above, maybe they automatically have resistance, which kind of is a limitation in itself, but it could be a limiting factor where if the power of their mind, i.e., the level they are, allows them to have great power over those below them. But those powerful creatures like dragons, fiends, celestials, and whatnot, even at a minimum, they have resistance to you lower level mortals and your psychic abilities simply by virtue of their power. I can't imagine a third level character psychically assaulting a dragon and getting away with it without having some big backlash. That dragon, even without psionic abilities, is probably like, listen, I've been around alive for a couple thousand years. I may not have psionics, but I know one when I feel one, and you're a psionicist. Yeah, Alex says, you have to counter the counter. Yeah. Psychic tennis, anybody? Yeah, so I use my psychic blast. I counter it with my psychic defense. I use my counter psychic defense. I use my counter psychic defense, my counter psychic defense against your psychic defense, so that my psychic attack can get through. You know, RP says a doppelganger who, instead of actually becoming that person, they alter the mind of others to see them as someone else. Could result in people seeing them differently depending on the image. They have that person in their memories. Yeah. Yeah. Alex says a dragon. Not gonna happen. Splat. But yeah, you can also flavor some of those abilities. Like what's the one ability, low level? Alter self. Alter self allows you to appear as someone else, and that could just be you broadcasting what you want to look like into other people's minds. Maybe that doesn't work inside of like animals or skeletons or golems, you know, or oozes or plants or something. They're just not affected by it or not fooled by it. Or a dog, which maybe, let's say they're guard dogs that use their sense of smell more than their sight. You may look like their owner, but you don't smell like them. That might be a thing too. Similar to the doctor's psychic paper. I was like, the doctor, what the hell is he talking? I get it. Vince says, I personally wouldn't make it subtle. Having floating constructs or astral projection battles would just be more interesting. Yeah. Just making, I think just essentially just using psionics. The long story short would be, if you already have rules, just reskin things. Use flavor. Flavor is always a far more a cheaper, more creative, more flexible tool than anything by reflavoring what you already have. Reskinning is the second part, where you just rename everything. You know, instead of spells, there's psionic points or something. Instead of cantrips, there's psionic disciplines or what have you. Just reskinning the names. If you want to go further, reskin the sources of where it comes from. You go even further by changing the rules a little bit, by saying, okay, you don't have any of the spell components, but you have to use concentration. Maybe you have a limitation where you can only concentrate on as many as your intelligence bonus or whatever your spell casting stat is. So if you use wisdom or charisma, if it's a +3, you can only concentrate on 3 things at a time, such as like whatever. So anyway, guys, RP saying, RP Gamer says, anyway, got to go, guys. Enjoy your day. Yeah, everybody out there, all you guys, and enjoy it. Vince, Alex, thanks for joining me. Dead Man the Storyteller, thanks for popping in. All you guys, actually, thank you very much for just being a part of this, like sitting around a table with our digital pizza. Yeah, Vince says, well, if I would make psionics, I would limit it to just a couple of powers you could use as flexible. Telekinesis and telepathy are the classics, of course. That's how it would make it in Dungeon World, for example. Yeah, and then any like you could apply like since TK, telekinesis, and telepathy are like the basics. When someone wants to do something extremely specific or bending the rules a bit, when instead of something broad, very narrow, you could have higher chances of failure by making the difficulty to do it harder. So telekinetically lifting a brick might not be hard, but telekinetically threading a needle might be extremely hard, right? So Telekinetically removing the paint off of a small object might be very subtle, or whatnot, or shattering someone's weapon in their hand might be very difficult. So you might actually have difficulty doing specifics or targeting specific people or objects, whereas doing something broad, such as I just let out a telekinetic scream and just shake everything off the walls, you know. Alex says you won't see the psychic energy unless you can see auras and see someone intentionally focusing on telekinesis while lifting objects. And that's going to be based on your setting, right? Maybe in my world, when someone uses their mental abilities, it does affect the air itself. Like there is a physical change from the individual to what they're trying to do, unless they have, say, a subtle feat or subtle ability or something. Otherwise, it is the acceptance of the ability to do something hidden and secret, which can unbalance the game unless everyone else has the same ability to do it too. So I would say it would be based on your setting. Now, if you allow it in your setting, go for it, whatever. You know, that's just part parcel of the game. But I would say, well, the bad guys can do the same thing too. Vincent says, if you want to see what a person with telekinesis can do, just look at Magneto, and he's limited to metal. Yeah, that's the thing. And, you know, of course, it's based on level, ability, points in it. You know, can you lift a tank? Well, maybe not. But look at Magneto with a couple of ball bearings. Look how much damage he's been able to do throughout many of the movies, right? So, and then it's based on force. Can you throw a ball bearing at the speed of a bullet? Can you steal a gun out of someone's back pocket and use it to shoot someone? What's the movie? The movie Push is a great. The movie may not have been the best, but the movie itself is a great example of people with great psychic abilities battling each other, from like mind control to telekinesis, and having a telekinetic fight with the pistols where they're using the guns to shoot around corners and stuff. It was pretty cool. So anyway, guys, I'm going on a little too long, here. I do have to get ready for work. Thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for the digital pizza. All you guys, you know, the usual, everything's down below the video. All the links, all the people who are engaged in the chat are part and parcel of our larger world. So please patronize them, if you will. Look them up. They are absolute co-hosts with me. The rest of the week, we'll be talking about Psionics and all its permutations in and out the game as well. We'll see what that looks like tomorrow with tips and tricks, but we'll save that as a surprise. So, guys, thank you for joining me. Until next time, I'm RPG with DBJ. Thank you very much.